Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if, overnight, the warmth of your world simply vanished? Imagine going to bed with the hum of city life outside your window, only to wake up to a silence so deep it feels unnatural. The cars on your street frozen in place, the trees turned into glass statues, and the air so sharp it cuts with every breath. It sounds impossible, does not it? Yet history whispers that Earth has frozen before, and science warns that it could freeze again. The real question is, if it happened tonight, would you be ready? Before we step further into this story of ice and survival, take a moment, like this video, tell me if you believe such a future could ever unfold, and subscribe so you won't miss the hidden truths we are about to uncover together. Now, let us walk into the cold. To understand what might await us, you have to look back, not decades but thousands of years. Long before skyscrapers, airplanes, or the internet, Earth was locked in ice. Glaciers stretched across continents, carving valleys, swallowing forests, and silencing rivers beneath their crushing weight. And yet, humanity endured. Imagine small bands of our ancestors, huddled around fragile fires, armed only with stone tools, staring into nights colder than anything you have ever known. Archaeologists have found mammoth bones etched with cuts from human blades, proof that survival meant more than hiding. It meant adapting, hunting, and sometimes bringing down giants. But there is something else buried in the caves of that era, paintings of strange lights across the sky. Were they auroras, dazzling curtains of green and red, or were they warnings scrawled by hands that somehow knew the ice would return? Now bring the story closer into your own lifetime. Imagine waking in New York, and the skyline is gone, swallowed by mountains of snow so tall only antennas pierce the white. Picture London, where the Thames has frozen solid, a vast sheet of ice where people no longer stroll for leisure but trade scraps of food for survival. Or Tokyo, once glowing with neon, now a silent maze of frozen alleys, echoing only with the crunch of boots on ice. This is not fantasy, it is what scientists fear could happen if ocean currents collapse. The Gulf Stream, that hidden river of warmth, keeps winters at bay. But if it falters, winter may never leave. And then comes the question, walking through these buried cities, what would you do? Would you light fires in the dark of a subway tunnel, or would you join caravans marching south, chasing warmth as pilgrims once chased relics of faith? Civilization would not vanish, it would simply be forced to bow to a new ruler, the ice. Think for a moment about how fragile your world truly is. The phone in your pocket, the glowing screens, the food in the supermarket, the gas in your car, all of it depends on a delicate network of systems. Now imagine those systems collapsing under the weight of endless snow. Electric grids would fail first, power lines snapping under ice. The internet would vanish, leaving billions cut off from each other in silence. Planes grounded, highways buried, ports frozen. It would not take years. It would take weeks. And here's the chilling thought. In an age where we believe ourselves advanced, the collapse would feel harsher than ever. Because for the first time in history, billions of people who never needed to hunt, farm, or even build a fire would suddenly be thrust into survival mode. So let me ask you, when your phone is just a frozen brick, when your fridge is only an empty shell, what would you do to make it through that first night? In times of chaos, people always look to the past for answers. And history is full of whispers that seem strangely relevant now. Ancient scrolls from Egypt describe a white death that would cover the lands. The Mayans spoke of a sun that sleeps, plunging the world into endless cold. Even medieval monks recorded visions of frozen fields where no crops would grow. Skeptics call these stories allegory. But what if they were memories? What if the ancients were not predicting but remembering? Hidden in forgotten libraries are manuscripts that scholars rarely speak of. One, discovered in a monastery in the 19th century, warned of the return of the frozen crown. The text was dismissed as myth, but if you read between the lines it speaks eerily of currents ceasing, skies dimming, and kings falling. And here's the unsettling question. Are we living the very prophecy those ancestors tried to leave behind? When the systems fall and prophecies echo, humanity fractures. Some would retreat underground, building cities beneath the frost. Others would roam across the ice as nomads, chasing what little warmth remains. History shows us this is how civilizations always react. They split, adapt, and fight for dominance. But here's the twist. Modern humanity is not ready. Picture Americans raiding Walmart for generators and blankets, turning aisle 7 into a battlefield over the last electric heater. It sounds absurd, until you remember how quickly shelves emptied during a simple snowstorm. In this frozen world, survival would no longer mean who has the most money, but who can build a fire, mend clothes, or hunt a rabbit. Those with skills long thought outdated, blacksmiths, farmers, even storytellers, would suddenly rise as leaders. So tell me, in this new ice age where strength is measured not by wealth but by survival, would you stand among the leaders or the lost? Throughout history, the greatest wars have never truly been about ideology, they have been about resources. And in a frozen world, nothing would be more precious than fire. Imagine nations turning against each other, not for gold or oil, but for coal, uranium, and the last reserves of natural gas. Picture tanks rolling through blizzards, fighter jets grounded because fuel is too scarce, soldiers trudging through snow like medieval crusaders. It might sound like a dystopian movie, but think back, Rome fell when food grew scarce, kingdoms collapsed when winters lingered. Now scale that to billions of people armed with nuclear weapons. Would leaders risk annihilation just to secure enough fuel to keep their people alive one more winter? And here's the terrifying irony. The more humanity fights for warmth, the colder the world becomes. But what if I told you? Some people already knew. Leaked documents have long circulated in whispers. Papers claiming that government agencies and space organizations predicted sudden cooling decades ago. A report allegedly buried in NASA's archives spoke of catastrophic thermohaline collapse, a phrase that sounds like science fiction until you realize it describes the very ocean currents keeping our climate alive. And then there are the stranger claims that hidden vaults in the Arctic store blueprints for underground cities, stockpiles of seeds, and even preserved DNA of extinct animals. Were these contingency plans, insurance policies, or a quiet admission that those in power knew the ice would come again? So the question is not whether humanity was warned. The question is, why were not you? Look toward the seas and the story grows darker still. Oceans, once highways of trade and connection, would transform into graveyards of ice. Imagine cargo ships trapped mid-journey, their hulls split as ice sheets expand. Naval fleets immobilized, their mighty engines useless beneath frozen waves. Fishing boats abandoned, their crews vanishing into the white void. History has echoes of this fate. The Franklin expedition, lost to Arctic ice in the 1800s, its ships discovered decades later, perfectly preserved like time capsules. Now picture that tragedy, not as an isolated story, but repeated across every ocean. And here's the thought that lingers. When the seas freeze and the ships fall silent, humanity's arteries close. What happens to a world when the oceans themselves refuse to move? When the old order collapses, something new always takes its place. In the frozen silence, humanity would fracture into tribes, not by nationality, but by survival. Picture one tribe, dwelling deep underground, their cities lit by generators and hydroponic farms. Another, roaming across the ice in armored convoys, scavenging fuel and hunting whatever dares to move. And in the south, perhaps, a warmer refuge where those who endure the journey establish kingdoms of ash and fire. History has seen this before. When Rome fell, new kingdoms rose. When empires crumbled, tribes carved out their dominions. The Ice Age would be no different. But here's the unsettling thought. In this new world, democracy, money, and law may vanish, replaced by strength, loyalty, and fear. So tell me, if tribes rose tomorrow, who would you follow? The engineers who can power a city, or the warlords who can protect it? But there is one more element that no one dares to speak of. What sleeps beneath the ice? Scientists have warned that melting glaciers could release ancient viruses, locked away for millennia. But myths whisper of something darker, creatures frozen in time waiting. Imagine mammoths shaking off the frost, leviathans stirring in frozen seas, or beings that no history book dares to name. In Siberia, hunters once found a perfectly preserved lion cub, 30,000 years old. If a cub can survive in ice, what else lies entombed, waiting for a thaw? And what happens when the thaw never comes, but instead the world itself joins their prison of frost? It is a chilling idea that humanity might not only be fighting hunger, cold, and each other, but also something far older and far less forgiving. And so we come to the edge of the story, the last dawn. Picture a horizon where the sun struggles to rise, its light dimmed by veils of frost in the atmosphere. Humanity gathers in fragments, tribes, survivors, wanderers, all staring at a sky that no longer promises warmth. Will civilization end here, buried under snow like the ruins of Pompeii under ash? Or will this be the crucible that forges something new, an evolution, a rebirth born from ice? Throughout history, every collapse has carried seeds of renewal. But never before has renewal required enduring a planet ruled by winter. The question lingers, hanging heavy in the frozen air: is this the twilight of mankind, or its second dawn? And here, at the end of our journey, we step back from the frozen horizon. The story of a new ice age is not just about cold winds and silent cities, it is about humanity itself. How fragile we are, and yet how fiercely we cling to life. Perhaps this tale will remain only a what-if, a bedtime story you will carry in your mind. Or perhaps, one day history will remind us that the ice has never truly gone, only slept. Thank you for walking through this frozen vision with me. Now I want to hear from you. If a new ice age began tomorrow, what would be the first thing you would do to survive? And beyond that, what topic would you like me to explore in our next story together?